Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we're gonna do a recommendations video. So as you can see, we have a slightly different background today. That is because currently my bookshelf is kind of a mess, and I have some cleaning and organizing to do, and since I recently cleaned my desk space, I figured, well, good time to utilize this. Also, I will apologize if you hear background noise. I have a fan going, but it is really hot in here. I'm going to die otherwise, so it's staying on. I'm sorry. So normally when I do recommendations videos, they're like obviously book related, whether it's a specific genre or seasonal or whatever, you get it. You've probably seen a couple of them here and there. Today, I like to do some recommendations on podcasts, which is one of my other favorite pastimes. Listening to lots and lots of podcasts. Basically, I am recommending podcasts that I have at least either listened to all of it, as in the podcast itself is like done, it's complete, and I've listened to the entire thing, or I've listened to everything that's out, so I'm like currently caught up or almost caught up. Maybe there's a episode that came out this week and I haven't listened yet, but I'm mostly caught up. Or podcasts that I'm not caught up, but I have listened to a chunk of it so far, so I feel like I have an idea of the vibe of it overall and feel comfortable recommending it. So to better break this down, I figured I could go by theme, I guess. Now, some of these do overlap in interests, but for the most part, they're related to like a specific thing. Let's start, of course, in the most obvious place with bookish podcasts, or podcasts that are related to books, reading, words. Yeah. So these are in no particular order. Yeah, the first one that I can recommend is called The Librarian Is In. So this is a podcast that is put on by the New York City Public Library. This is one of the ones that I am only partially of the way through. I think I've listened up till like 2021 in there, but I'm still like catching up. I hosted by a couple of different librarians. I really love this podcast because it's not only like just fun discussions between the hosts relating to books that they have read recently. They usually do like a discussion time to talk a little bit about whatever they've been reading. Occasionally there might be like a almost spoiler thing, but they try to keep spoilers out of there, but they do usually warn you ahead of time if they're going to be talking about something and it's probably going to count as a spoiler. But I really enjoy the discussions between them and hearing about all the different types of books that they read, learn about authors or books that I hadn't heard of, the various like library programs and librarianship. They also do episodes where they will speak with other librarians within the New York like library system, at other, like, I guess there is a lot of libraries. I didn't realize how many libraries were in New York, or specifically within the city of New York. I guess there's quite a few, so you learn more about like those programs and librarianship in general, and they talk with other librarians, they speak with authors. It's just very interesting. And yeah, it's something I would consider not like a full comfort listen, but if I feel like I've been listening to maybe too much true crime or something like that, that's always a nice one to come back to and feel comfortable in the warm arms of the librarians. No, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, yeah, Librarian's In. It's a good time. Next podcast that I can recommend is the Losers Club. So this is hosted by, I didn't write any of their names down. Oh, pass, Jen, what were you doing? So this is hosted by, I believe there's 4 or 5 hosts to this show. It's completely devoted to Stephen King's works. Full disclosure, I have not, this is one that, like I said, I've listened to a good chunk of it, but I haven't listened to all of it, and this is because I have only been listening to specific episodes that are related to books I've already read, because they will go fully in depth. They'll talk about King's writing, different things throughout the book, their impressions of it. They break down like not only things they liked about it, but things they didn't enjoy so much. They talk in depth about like the particular editions that they've read from their experiences while reading it, whether it's this is their first time, this is a reread. And they also have episodes devoted to adaptations, whether they are like mini-series or film. Because I don't want spoilers, have only been listening to the episodes of books that I've read. So that's a lot of fun if you're a big fan of Stephen King. That's really entertaining. Then we have, shifting gears slightly, the Sleepy Bookshelf, which the host Elizabeth reads chapters of, I think everything's pretty much in the public domain. It's like classics and a lot of like children's literature, especially classic children's literature. She reads that in like her super calming voice. There's a little bit of background music in the beginning. It is absolutely amazing to fall asleep to if you are someone who has problems falling asleep sometimes. Like, this shit puts me out within about 10 or 15 minutes. It is just great. So I'd also recommend Shedunnit. This one is hosted by Caroline Crampton, and it explores the world of vintage, like, detective fiction, mystery novels, discussing themes that are, like, specific to the author, specific to certain characters, and also giving context to certain stories. So she gives a lot of historical context to certain situations. She'll have specific themed ones, like, let's talk about the manor house situation at the time is in relating to a lot of detective fiction, go in depth into specific themes. She had an episode about like spinsters in crime, so like a lot about Miss Marple and everything. Really interesting. She also has really fascinating guest stars, oftentimes, who are always like a delight to listen to. It has some lovely kind of period-ish music, very interesting content, and I've honestly learned a lot about detective fiction and even more authors that I need to check out in the future. That's how I started reading Niall Marsh. That is how I found out about Hankaku mysteries, so like the 100 murders that I read. Was that earlier this year or was that last year? I think it was last year. Yeah, so I've learned a lot about all of that. It's very fascinating. And moving back into kind of adaptation territory, there is film Literate. Host Devin discusses books, and he does like discuss the books, but a lot of the times he like focuses a lot on the film adaptations of the books. And as someone who oftentimes has like mixed feelings about adaptations, and, you know, just, I don't know, sometimes they're really good and sometimes not so much. I do really like hearing thoughts about the adaptations, especially when it's coming from someone who, like, obviously knows way more about film study than I do. I know, like, a minuscule amount from listening to my husband go on and on about Hitchcock sometimes. Like, I don't really know that much about it, so it is really interesting to listen to the host, like, kind of discuss that kind of thing within the adaptations and relating it back to, like, the book. Then we have Diary of an Ex-English Major, and the host, Deja, who also actually is on Instagram, and I just found her on YouTube too. She is an ex-English major, and she discusses, like, books and bookish topics and, like, analyzes them in an academic manner. So if you, like, it's really interesting, and if you, like, miss those discussions from college, like, if that's something you legitimately kind of miss, that just the way those discussions could, like, go in school and how in-depth everything, if you miss that, like, this one is definitely for you. It's very entertaining. We have interesting people reading poetry. The hosts, Andy and Brandon, have combined, like, mesmerizing music and, like, soundscapes with interviews with fascinating people. So these people, like, they talk about themselves, their careers, their art, their activism, whatever they are known for, whatever they have going on, and they also read their favorite poem, and part of that interview, part of that discussion is them explaining why that poem means so very much to them, why it is one of their favorites. It's doing something really interesting. I'm kind of sad that they don't post that often. This is one that I want to say they post every couple of months, and I am kind of sad that it isn't more often than that, but I know it takes, like, a lot of time and effort to be able to put these together, and they're honestly really beautiful episodes, and they are very interesting people. So if you're a fan of, like, poetry, you like hearing about different people's lives and stuff like that, and relating back to certain poems, like, it's just really legitimately a beautiful podcast. Then there is probably a familiar name to a lot of people, Levar Burton reads. So it's Levar Burton, actor. You know, you might know him as Geordi LaForge from Star Trek. You might know him as the dude from Reading Rainbow. He, in this podcast, reads some of the best short fiction. So if you, like, grew up with a Reading Rainbow, if you enjoy hearing Levar Burton reading and that, like, super, like, just sweet, chill ass voice that he has, like, this is a good one too. He reads really interesting stories, and it's, like, by a whole variety of authors. So there's, like, old stories, but there's, like, authors. He also reads, like, stories from authors who are still currently on this mortal coil as well. So that's it for bookish ones so far. Then we get into just a couple of ones that I call fiction / gaming. So there's, like, stuff that is dealing with, like, writing or, like, fictional kind of storylines, and then there's also that also involves, like, gaming in a sense, or just nerdiness. Yeah, okay. The first of these is Dungeons and Daddies. It is not a BDSM podcast, except for that one time that it was. This is a campaign that basically follows 4 players and their DM as they are playing 4 dads who are transported to another realm like a fantasy world and the shenanigans they get up to on their quest to like locate and rescue their sons. If you play D&D or not, if you love it or not, if you don't know that much about it, if you're just curious or something like that, it doesn't matter. This is such a great podcast. These chuckleheads didn't really know what the hell that they were doing when they started out on this anyway, so it's fine. It is so freaking funny. Honestly, I have to be careful when I'm listening to it at work because it just makes me laugh so damn hard. It's ridiculous. It is one of the most ridiculous things you'll ever listen. It's so funny though. It is like legitimately so funny. Another one in a similar vein is The Adventure Zone, that is by the McElroys, Justin, Travis, and Griffin, as well as their dad Clint. They tackle D&D in their various levels of inexperience, and basically this like whole thing is them creating the characters and then following their quirky characters on their quests. This is also laugh out loud funny. Same thing applies to Dungeons & Daddies. If you played Dungeons and Dragons before, if you never have, if you're just curious, if you know, whatever, it's really enjoyable. It is really funny. And the Adventure Zone also has several graphic novels that are out. I have included them in wrap-ups before, so you've probably heard me talk about this before. You'll see a lot of the McElroys on here in this list, actually, because I listen to a lot of the podcasts that they're involved with. One a little bit different from that is Story Break. So this is Hollywood professionals, which actually some of them are from Dungeons and Daddies, try to write a movie each week based on some of the oddest ideas. So from sequels of movies to serial mascots to video games or video game character movies. They did an episode about a movie about Jar Jar Binks, you know, the one character that maybe nobody really wanted a movie for. It is hilarious. They are buck wild. I love those idiots. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, not only just because it's like really funny, but also just from like a writing standpoint too. It's just really funny. Then I'd also recommend Dead Pilots Society, and I know this one is really popular too, like very popular, so this one might be a little more well known, but it's basically scripts that were never produced are given the table reads that they deserve. It's starring actors, a lot of whom you may know, in front of a live audience, and it's basically just an all-around good time. It is sometimes wacky, it is always funny, just ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous, really weird, really funny. Then I have a couple recommendations I can give of history or historical podcasts, history-related podcasts. The first is Aaron Mahnke's Cabinet of Curiosities. Aaron Mahnke, he's actually will come up again because I also listen to a couple of his podcasts. The Cabinet of Curiosities is basically, it is just like mysteries, bizarre happenings, odd objects throughout history, just an all-around basically curiosity cabinet of the almost unbelievable tidbits from across history. So for example, I believe there was an episode about like a literal cabinet of curiosity, like the cabinets that were used in like seances during the Victorian period, you know, when the spiritualism movement was like in full swing. I think there was also an episode about a horse that was able to communicate via, I think it was like word blocks or like letter blocks or something. Just random, just weird things that are like, what category of history do you put these in? Because they're just curiosities. They're just like random, really weird things. Then there is also American Shadows. So this one focuses on like the darker side of American history and things do get pretty dark sometimes. The host, Lauren, goes into like lesser known parts of US history that you probably didn't learn about in school. Like I think one of the first episodes I listened to had to do with a plot by Confederates to try to steal Lincoln's body, and I think they almost succeeded. It was like just crazy bananas stuff. Another one is Sawbones. So this is hosted by Justin McElroy and his wife, Dr. Sydney McElroy, as they discuss the gross and terrible ways that people throughout history have attempted to fix each other. This one is not for the squeamish. It really isn't. There was an episode about lobotomy that was challenging. I actually had to stop listening to it and skip to the next episode. So that one, I would say, if you are squeamish about certain things, just make sure to read the descriptions of the episode before you proceed. Because, yeah, it can be a little gross. But that one also really interesting, and it's also kind of fun to get this, like, Justin basically being silly, and then Sydney being like, yeah, that's messed up, and yeah, this is not the right medical procedure now, or anything like. It's, yeah, that dynamic is also a lot of fun too. And then the last one for history would be Scoundrel, History's Forgotten Villains. I think I've listened to the entire thing. This is one of those podcasts that's like that there doesn't seem to be like any more. It pretty much ended at some point, but it is really interesting. It's deep dives into some of the villains of history, and it breaks down like what made them, their deeds, and seeing like the whole historical context of the world that they were living in, what possibly contributed to them being a villain, and basically just trying to make sure that we don't repeat history's evilness. I learned a lot from that podcast and found more fascinating characters throughout history that I'd like to research more for like writing stuff. True crime. So to start off with, Small Town Murder. This one is hosted by comedians Jimmy Wiseman and James Petrogallo. So they look into like small towns, the history of the small towns, different facts about them, so you can get like a really good idea of them in your head, and then they dive into like the terrible murders that took place there. They do make fun of like the towns, and I mean they both grew up in small towns as well, so they do tend to make fun of like the towns. They make fun of the murderers. Sometimes they make fun of the cops that are bungling the things in the small towns because they're just not used to that kind of thing. But they never make fun of the victims or their loved ones because they're assholes, but not scumbags. Then a recent one that I think I mentioned fairly recently is the Poisoner's Cabinet. Nick and Sinead tell each other cases of history's famous poisoners, as well as other macabre tales, all while partaking of alcoholic drinks inspired by that week's tale. There are some delicious drink recommendations. I have tried a couple of them. Really good. Very interesting tales. They both have delightful accents, and there is a lot of hilarity throughout. I really, truly love the hosts. They are absolutely hilarious. Their friendship is hilarious, and I think they do like a really good job with the research, with breaking things down, with making everything very interesting. And yeah, it's very interesting. It's a really good one. Other one would be Fresh Hell Podcast. So I know I've mentioned that one before. Annie from the US and Johanna from Austria, who are two friends who have never met in real life yet. They talk about murder, mystery, and the macabre. So they cover not only like true crime specific cases, they also will cover on occasion weird or paranormal related things, as well as strange tales about the macabre, like freak theme park accidents, for example. Those ones were at times hard to listen to, but also really interesting. They also discuss like animal tales. They really go deep into the history too, so if that's your jam, you will probably like that one a lot, because they do a lot of research and into everything, so you have like a full idea of the world or the setting at the time of whatever they're talking about. If you're going through hell, keep going. Is We Are Resilient. This is also one that I just recently found and have been listening to. So this podcast is extremely dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women. A lot of the cases are unsolved, so it can be hard to listen to. I know personally I have a harder time listening to things that are unsolved, because I'm not even related to the cases at all, and it drives me fucking batty. I cannot imagine how anyone who is specifically related to anyone who unfortunately is missing or their cases have been unsolved, I can't even imagine how they feel. But it is so important to listen to them. Like, these women, their cases do not get nearly as much attention as like other cases. It is a very like really important topic to hear more about, because these women's stories deserve more attention than they get, whether they have been solved, whether they are still missing, their cases are currently cold cases, whatever. It is very important to listen to them. And this is also covered by a couple of Indigenous women themselves, so you're also hearing these stories through the lens of women who are a part of that community. Another one I could recommend is True Crime Campfire. So the two hosts tell dark and creepy tales around the true crime campfire. So season 1 is a deep dive into a truly bizarre murder case that's not too well known. I actually have not listened to all of season 1. I've only listened to one episode of season 1 so far, but I am completely caught up on like season 2, and season 2 has like a different case every week. They do not mince words about the baddies of each story, so if you also like hearing someone verbally eviscerate murderers and terrible people with a lot of swears, this is your podcast. Another one, which I think is it's still one of the most popular true crime podcasts out there, so if you haven't heard of anything else, you've probably heard of this one. It is My Favorite Murder. Karen and Georgia sit crooked and talk straight each week. They tell each other tales of true crime with some horror, mystery, and survivor stories thrown in here and there. They also read stories that listeners send in. One is A Date with Dateline. So Kimberly and Katie recap episodes of Dateline, which I personally love because I don't watch Dateline anymore. In fact, I don't really watch any true crime stuff because images are harder to get out of my head than words. Yeah, they recap episodes of Dateline with commentary and supreme love for the Dateline hosts. So that is Dennis Is Enough Murphy, Josh Mahnke with the Hanky, Mankiewicz, the Lean King Keith Morrison, and our lovely queen Andrea Canning. These ladies can be a little bit snarky, but personally I don't know, I kind of like that. So then there is Once Upon a Crime. Esther Ludlow tells a story each week about true crime cases. She usually has a theme for like the month or so, and groups cases together. So for example, in October she does Rocktober, and she features tales of infamous bands or musicians and crimes that they did, or that some of their members were involved in, or crazy shit that they were a part of, or that they just kind of got pulled into. She did an episode, my personal favorite is about the 10-cent beer night in the 1970s. Just, if you want to listen to any episode, go for that one because it is really entertaining. But yeah, she does a very good job with her very in-depth research, and she has a good way of basically telling you the story of that crime and giving you all the background information. Another one is Vintage Homicide. So this is two forensic scientists break down true crime cases and go into details about the forensics that were used at the time, and they also talk a little bit about forensics now, and it's just really interesting looking at these old-timey cases through like the lens of people who like that's their job, is forensics. It's really fascinating, and also it's been pretty helpful for one of my writing projects. So okay, then we get into the next category, which is folklore / paranormal / other horror things. Okay, so then there is one of my absolute favorite podcasts, which is Real Life Ghost Stories. I am actually wearing a t-shirt of theirs, wearing their merch. This podcast covers hauntings, ghosts, aliens, death, psychology, cryptids, basically everything spooky and mysterious. Emma has just such a delightful voice, very engaging way of telling a story, and she also reads listener stories as well, and it's just overall such a good podcast. I listen as soon as an episode comes out. I just love it. Another one is, oh yeah, so it was called A Dark Memory, and I think it will still show up as A Dark Memory, but I guess he recently changed it to Horror Story. The host Edwin tells tales of horror stories, dark history, creepy folklore, and mysterious circumstances from like all over the world. There's also creepy music and like soundscape stuff that lends like a really eerie vibe to it as well. Then there is Two Girls, One Ghost. Yes, that is their podcast name. Besties Corinne and Sabrina tell each other creepy tales each week, as well as read listener stories. Their discussions into conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal can sometimes get a bit off kilter sometimes, but they are a hoot and a half, and they do a lot of research into various creepy topics, and it is pretty entertaining and interesting overall. Then there is Odd Trails. The hosts Andrew and Brandon and occasional guests read creepy stories sent in, as well as discuss their own tales at the end. It's all like unexplained, like paranormal things, all that creepy shit. If you want chills, that's definitely one to listen to. And then there's, related to that sort of, is Let's Not Meet. So it's Andrew Tate again. This one he hosts by himself, and he reads tales that are sent in by listeners of true horror. So this is like not ghosts, cryptids, anything like that. The true horror is other humans. This is weird and terrifying tales of things that people do, and those that survive scary and strange encounters. This one also give you super chills. I think honestly that one creeps me out more than Odd Trails, to be entirely honest, because human beings are terrifying. Another one is And That's Why We Drink. So this is hosted by Christine and M. Christine covers true crime, while M talks about all things spooky, paranormal, cryptid, alien. They have gotten way weird with some of the stuff they have covered in the past couple of years too. It gets crazy. Then there is, this one's also a recent find, Tales from the Break Room. So the host reads tales sent in from around the world about their scariest encounters, either at work or while they are traveling to or from work. So it's like not always right, but creepier. Some of these are really out there, and the host himself says sometimes that they're allegedly true. Some of the ones that are really out there are allegedly true. But yeah, so some of them get really weird. So then there's the Ghost Story Guys. So Paul and Brennan tell scary stories each week with a bunch of humor and some skepticism. I like when they dive into like true tales behind movies or books and like creepy stories everyone like loves to be creeped out about. Those are really interesting. And then there is Lore, Aaron Mahnke again, talking about folklore. So this honestly could even be considered like historical, as he goes heavy into like history, but it's also just fascinating to learn the stories behind different folklore of various places that we've heard about. He also like goes into ghost stories and mysterious things like that. It's really interesting. I really like how in-depth he goes into different circumstances. He's like really trying to basically, I guess, educate people on how crazy rumors and things like that happened in the past because of misunderstandings or just willful ignorance and things like that, and just going into how lore started because of these things and then how bad things happened because of that particular lore. So it's like, it's sometimes it can get pretty grim, but overall it's really interesting. Then there's You Can See Me in the Dark. Melissa and Nate host, but their listeners record the creepy and macabre tales of spooky encounters. This is honestly scarier when it's told in the actual person who experienced it, when it's told in like their actual, not only their words the host is reading, but like their actual like voice telling you these experiences. It's really creepy. Then there is Ghost Tales by the Fireside. So Clem Dalloway tells true ghost stories from around the United Kingdom. This one has eerie music and sounds throughout, which personally I love. It's a fucking vibe. It makes it a whole experience overall, not just like a podcast episode, but like a full listening experience. It is super creepy. There's a couple of particular noises that he uses often that are really, really creepy. But if that's not your jam, he has recently been releasing some episodes minus the background soundscape, so yeah. Another one that I've started listening to recently is Welcome to Paradise, It Sucks. It's Andrew Tate again. This is also one of those true horror experiences, mostly. So with commentary and travel tips, as well as he basically does like commentary and travel tips, as well as including listener stories. Basically, again, listeners recording their stories of horrific vacations that they took. It is absolutely hilarious. I cringed a couple of times so far listening to this episode, going, oh my god. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, make you feel better about your own experiences, possibly. Honestly, though, I would beware the amount of times the vomit is brought up, because it is brought up quite often. Another one would be Ghost in the Burbs. So Liz Sauer tells tales of severely haunted Wellesley, Massachusetts. The Swells itself is a vibe. I suggest you check it out. I don't want to give too much more away than that, because it is a creepy one. The last paranormal related one I could recommend is These Dark Mountains. So this covers crimes and mysterious and creepy tales of the people who made Vermont what it is. So when I was growing up, we weren't taught too much state history. Like, we learned some things here and there, but we didn't really go like super in depth or anything. So I really like hearing tales of, you know, where I used to grow up, where I grew up. I've got 2 categories left. So let's see. We have witchy. So if you are of the wishy inclination, I could recommend Witch Wednesdays. So the host Steph covers like all sorts of topics from the beginning, having to do with like all things witchy. It is for the novice and the veteran alike, so it covers like basics to advanced topics. It's fairly interesting. And then there's also Witch Yes, which is hosted by Alicia and Tara. They cover topics like basic information such as like zodiac facts, Sabbath's tarot, as well as also covering like wishes in the news, which is a segment that I really like as well, because it talks about like, sometimes it's good things and then sometimes it's like, hey, just so you know, somebody in a country just killed a kid because they said she was a witch and she just had funky looking eyes. So sometimes it's depressing, but all things that are important to know about. So they cover that, various topics. They're also really funny, and they always include some type of spell at the end of their episode as well. And then the last category I have is what I consider comedy / miscellaneous. Start off with Wonderful. So Griffin McElroy, again, and his wife Rachel, they started this podcast actually as Rose Buddies. It was a fan cast breaking down each episode of like the Bachelor and Bachelorette franchise at that point, which if you don't want to watch them but you're still slightly curious and you like hearing snark about it, like it's fun. They did it for, I want to say about a year, maybe 2. But they ended up changing to their current theme, which basically covers things that make them happy each week, from favorite music to poetry they love to favorite childhood food, or a book that they really like reading to their kids. It's very chill. So if you're like me and you've been listening to way too much true crime and ghosts and shit all of the time, it is a very soothing podcast to to listen to, where you just get to hear about a couple flirt with each other, which is very cute, but also joke around and like discuss the things that make them like really happy. Another one I could recommend is Beach Too Sandy, Water Too Wet. So this is siblings Alex and Christine Schieffer. Christine is also one of the posts of And That's Why We Drink that I mentioned earlier. So she does this podcast with her brother, and they do dramatic readings of 1-star reviews written by people on the internet. So it's like real first world problem shit. Just reviews of like hotels, restaurants, stores, sometimes it's parks. It's pretty ridiculous. Then there is Ear Biscuits. So this is Rhett and Link of GMM fame. They chat each week. Sometimes the episodes are serious. It's always funny. They also have really great convos with a bunch of other interesting entertainers. A lot of them are also entertainers on the internet. But I do think they've also had... this is one that I've listened to several episodes, but not like... I'm definitely not caught up. But they do talk to a lot of different people in the entertainment industry. Another one I can recommend is The Empty Bowl. This is a meditative podcast about cereal, hosted by Justin McElroy, and I did not write the other dude's name down, and I feel bad now. It has very calming background music. It is really easy to listen to if you need something to listen to help you sleep. It is just really calm, super chill, but also really funny because it's just about cereal, or about cereal related things. And I've listened to a good chunk of the episodes, and I still can't decide if any part of this podcast is actually supposed to be serious, or if the whole thing is just some kind of giant joke. I don't know, but it's enjoyable either way. And then my last recommendation that I can make for podcasts, which again, this is a big one, so you might have already heard about it, but it is My Brother and Me. This is the McElroys, so Justin, Travis, and Griffin. This podcast, they give some of the worst possible advice ever, although sometimes the advice is actually pretty good. But they just serve up a lot of laughs. This is another one that sometimes I have to be careful if I'm listening to it at work, because I will just... I don't know what my coworkers think if I'm just, like, in the middle of an aisle and I just start fucking dying. I don't know. You do want to start with, like, their older stuff. I would maybe suggest skipping the first, like, 100 episodes or so, because those ones are a little rough. And things, they definitely, they have aged like fine wine. Things, they've gotten funnier as time has gone along. Yeah. So that's it, you guys. That is all of the podcasts that I could recommend. I don't know if any of you are also super into podcasts, if any of this was helpful to you at all. I listen to a lot of them because my current job allows me to mostly work by myself for the most part, so oftentimes I will listen to music or occasionally an audiobook, but a lot of the times it is podcasts. And my previous job, when I started working from even occasionally, sometimes when I wasn't working from home, but mostly when I was just working from home, I would have that kind of there until that job got out of control. I would usually have a little episode playing in the background while I worked, just cause. So yeah, I've been fortunate over the past few years to have jobs that allowed me some time to be able to listen to stuff, and I also listen to stuff in the car, or when organizing books and cleaning and stuff like that sometimes too. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't know if any of these recommendations will be helpful for you guys. I hope at least something in here sounded interesting to you. I will leave basically links to, I know that most everyone on here, I think, has Instagram in some form or another, or websites, so I will try to leave links to those down below. If they happen to also have a YouTube channel, I will also leave links down below to that as well, so you guys can see everything. But all of these I listen to them on Spotify. I think there are a couple of other options that you could have to listen to, and a couple of these podcasts I know at least also upload audio to YouTube, so people can listen to it on there as well. So that's something. If you have listened to me talk about genres and things that I listen to, and you think of a podcast that I should check out, please let me know down below. I always love hearing about a new podcast to check out. If there's a particular favorite of yours that I mentioned, let me know. And yeah, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here and would like to subscribe, please consider doing so down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!